It started with a storm, not the kind that simply wets the ground, but a relentless symphony of thunder and rain that seemed to wash away time itself. Outside, the airport's world of neon and glass was wrapped in gray, streaked with rivulets running down enormous windows. Inside Gate 23, a single figure sat immobile. Her wheelchair was pulled close to the wide window, her hair a dark curtain shadowing her face from the world. Lila Chen, once the golden girl of Silicon Valley's elite, was now as invisible as the raindrops racing each other down the glass. Once her laugh filled boardrooms. She'd danced atop lines of code and financial projections, her father's pride, the mind behind half his innovations. But that was before the accident, before the darkness, before her world shrank to four wheels and whispered embarrassment. Now Lila was a secret exile. Her phone buzzed with unread messages, most perfunctory, some cruel. Friends from the before sent apologies for forgotten plans, busy lives, the distance that inevitably grew between the able and the not. Her father, CEO of 7 companies and master of every negotiation, had paid for the best doctors. He was always flying, rarely landing. Tonight, he was supposed to travel with her, another trip to another specialist, another promise whispered through teeth gritted with impatience. But she waited alone. The staff barely made eye contact. People's gazes skipped over her, the chair, the silence, her limp hands folded tight. The world continued spinning. She was left on the edge of its axis, forgotten. At the far end of the lounge, Daniel walked with purpose, the kind of exhausted, driven man who moved like the world owed him. His daughter Emma trotted beside him, dragging a too-big backpack patterned with sunflowers. Daniel was the anti-CEO, blue-collar grit, sleep always half lost, love buried deep behind practical tasks. Emma was chatterbox sunshine. He was a single dad in a world that felt carved from granite, always watching, always guarding. But this storm's delays stalled everyone. Restlessness hung heavy, broken only by Emma's voice. "Dad, why does she look so sad?" Daniel glanced toward Gate 23, and there he saw her. Not just the wheelchair, but the pained set of her shoulders, the quiet devastation beneath composed features. When his eyes met Lila's, if only for a fraction of a second, it felt like seeing a drowning person through glass. Most would pass by, most did, but some question, half annoyance, half concern, escaped his lips, the kind that can shift the stars. Why is she all alone? He meant to say it quietly, but sometimes the world listens, even when you don't want it to. Emma's eyes followed his. The air changed, charged with a possibility neither of them had expected. And as thunder rolled outside, one moment, one glance, one question, set the world on a new path. Lila turned, startled, and in that instant, strangers were no longer invisible to each other. No one, least of all Daniel or Lila, could know what this encounter would unleash. That night at Gate 23, everything was about to change, because sometimes the smallest storm stirs the greatest miracles, and in the shadow of losing everything, a single spark can light the way home. But the hardest journeys always begin with the simplest words, spoken at last when the world least expects them. Lightning flickered beyond the soaked glass, tracing blue veins through the gloom as the world outside dissolved into rain. Lila's phone scrolled a silent litany of delays. "Stay here, wait, wait." Her father's assistant, long gone. The last message read, "Stuck at board meeting, stay put." Alone under the clinical airport fluorescence, she tried not to cry. Down the row, Emma's small sneaker squeaked against the polished floor. "Dad, I want to go talk to her," she whispered, tugging at Daniel's sleeve. He shook his head, voice stiff. "It's not our business, sweetheart." But as he looked up, he saw Lila's hands fighting to adjust her blanket, awkward, rigid, her wrists thin, face pale with effort. The sight needled through his armor. Loneliness, not weakness, not pity. Emma, undeterred, tiptoed forward. "Hi, I like your earrings," she beamed, pointing at the tiny origami cranes dangling from Lila's lobes. Surprised by the kindness, Lila managed a cautious smile. "Thank you. They remind me of flying," she replied, her voice gentle, brittle with longing. Emma danced a little circle, then blurted, "Why are you here alone?" Lila weighed her answer, words like fragile glass in her mouth. "I'm waiting for my dad," she said, tucking a wet strand of hair behind her ear. After a pause, she added, "Sometimes people get lost, or they're just busy." Daniel hovered awkwardly nearby, glancing at his watch, then the windows, then Lila. "You all right over here?" he asked, the question meant to sound casual but landing with an unexpected weight. She looked up, her eyes holding his. No defiance, just a plea not to disappear. "I'm okay, just waiting for the storm to end." A burst of static crackled from the loudspeaker. Another delay, more hours in limbo. That was all it took for the people around them to shuffle away, melting into their screens, avoiding responsibility for the girl abandoned by circumstance and fate. Emma shifted closer, inviting herself and Lila into a tentative makeshift circle of warmth on the cold airport seats. Daniel fetched a bag of pretzels and a bottle of water, offering them wordlessly. When Lila's weak grip fumbled, Emma didn't flinch. She simply helped, a naturalness that made Lila's throat tighten. As the storm battered the terminal, Lila's mask slipped. She confessed in shy, aching fragments how she dreamed of Paris, of dancing, of the way friends drifted after her accident. Daniel, who'd raised his daughter alone after her mother left, heard the loneliness in her voice. He recognized the invisible armor she wore, the way Emma did when other kids ignored her daddy at parent nights. For the first time in months, laughter bubbled between them, awkward, then genuine. Emma's chatter painted stories of lost teeth and playground secrets. Lila offered a half smile, then another, as her world expanded beyond misery to possibility. But beyond their fragile truce, the airport remained a sea of indifference. People stared, some with pity, others with impatience, none daring to come closer. The soundtrack was still the storm, the tannoy's monotone apologies and their own tentative voices, threading through the space between old wounds and new hope. Yet, as the minutes layered, something in the trio began to change. Daniel, drawn in by Lila's resilience, felt protective. Lila, usually unseen, realized she was not invisible anymore. Emma, ever the bridge, warmed them both. None of them saw what came next. The storm would still grow fierce. Pain and revelation waited on the far side of midnight. But for now, in the glow of Gate 23, the spark of human kindness refused to be drowned. And as the storm howled, 3 souls found themselves, for the first time, not quite as alone. There was no way to know. By the end of this night, nothing for Lila or Daniel and Emma would ever be the same. The hours pressed on, measured out in flickering departures boards and the symphony of distant rolling thunder. By now, the terminal had thinned. A few stranded travelers hunched over glowing screens, an irritable couple negotiating with gate agents, a janitor humming off-key as she pushed her cart past the dimmed stores. For Lila, the world shrank to the circle of plastic airport chairs and the growing warmth she felt beside Daniel and Emma. Every sound outside, the rain lashing the glass, the whine of airplane engines, seemed eerily magnified. But as the night deepened, so did the fractures within each of them. Emma, once cheerful, began to wilt with restlessness, her eyelids drooping. She clung to Daniel's hand, but occasionally glanced at Lila with the flicker of an unasked question. Daniel, meanwhile, paced the window, trying to reach the airline on his phone, frustration needling into his voice as he got only apologies and robotic replies. Lila watched, uncertainty flickering in her chest. It wasn't her family, wasn't her storm, and yet here she was, caught right in the middle. As minutes crawled by, Daniel's patience unraveled. He barked at a gate agent not for himself, but for Lila. This young woman has been abandoned here for hours. Someone should take responsibility. The agent looked through them, mumbled about procedures, liability, and rules. They could not assist disabled passengers unless a named guardian arrived. Lila's cheeks burned as if spotlit. Words she'd tried to swallow tumbled out. "Please, I'm fine. I don't want trouble." Emma, sensitive to tension, squeezed Lila's hand. "You're not trouble. People just don't see sometimes." But the bite of other people's stares grew sharper. Behind them, a family pulled their child away, whispering, afraid of getting involved. A pair of teenagers snickered, daring each other to take a photo. Even the janitor paused, uncertain whether pity or averted eyes offered more dignity. The air, which had buzzed with tentative connection, soured into discomfort and doubt. Lila's old anxiety surged. Was she an obligation? Was Daniel only being polite out of guilt, out of duty? Did Emma pity her or simply cherish novelty? She found herself shrinking again, folding inward, as if by minimizing her body she could avoid disappointing anyone. Seeing her distress, Daniel knelt by her side. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have raised my voice. I just—" His words trailed off, weighty with memories of being the outsider himself. Sometimes the world makes us invisible, and sometimes we help it. Thunder shook the windows. Emma pressed her blanket to Lila's lap. "My friend at school uses a wheelchair, too. She's the best at hide and seek. You just have to watch corners. Do you want to play spot the airplanes with me?" Relief and heartbreak mingled in Lila's chest. "I'd like that." Restoring a sense of play brought them a fragile peace. But as Emma counted each blinking wing light in the rain, Lila noticed Daniel's phone lighting up repeatedly. Voicemails from his boss, missed calls from work, his world tugging him in another direction. And then a new message flashed on Lila's screen, a terse update from her father's assistant. "Your father's meeting extended overnight. Car will come for you in the morning." That was the turning point, a betrayal not by strangers, but by the very person supposed to care the most. A storm outside, a storm within. Lila struggled to keep her composure as the realization hit. She was truly alone tonight, except for these two near strangers whose presence had become lifeline and risk both. Daniel saw the tears she struggled to hide, and for a moment, neither had words. A wall had been breached, but neither yet knew how to build what came next. As midnight neared and the storm beat ever harder, the true journey, the one toward trust, toward healing, could only begin when nothing else was left. Out in the darkness, the world waited for their next move. And for the three at Gate 23, time itself paused, poised on the brink of heartbreak and revelation, as everything they thought they knew was about to be tested. Sometimes, before you can reach for hope, you must walk through the center of the storm. Midnight claimed the airport with a hush, broken only by the drone of cleaning machines and the restless hum of air vents. Most of the lights at Gate 23 had been dimmed. The world outside blurred. The storm was relentless, pounding the glass, blurring the boundaries between yesterday's pain and tomorrow's promise. For Lila, the ache of abandonment bit deeper as she read her father's message over and over. He would not be coming. No one else was. The brittle hope she'd nursed snapped, and a quiet sob slipped through her hands. She tried to muffle it, ashamed to reveal her heartbreak even now. Daniel, half dozing beside Emma, woke to her quiet crying. For a moment he hesitated. Years of ingrained stoicism warred with a new urge to reach out, not as a rescuer, but as someone who had known what it meant to be left behind. "I know I'm not your family," he said softly, voice rough with the effort of honesty. "But you're not actually alone right now." Lila shook her head, voice raw. "I'm just tired. Tired of being a burden, of everyone's pity, of everyone leaving." Emma, sleepy but fiercely loyal, climbed from her seat and wrapped a small arm around Lila's shoulder. "You're not a burden. My dad gets mad at everything, but I never give up on him." Daniel shot her a mock glare. Emma stuck out her tongue, and Lila actually laughed, a broken, startled sound that caught all of them off guard. But it wasn't enough to halt the spiral. A sudden announcement crackled through the empty terminal. "Due to severe weather, all remaining overnight flights are canceled. Passengers should make alternate arrangements." The words were a hammer blow. Panic rose. Where would Lila go? The airport staff, efficient but cold, reminded her that legally she needed a guardian or official escort to leave. No exceptions. Daniel protested, but policy was ironclad. Emma's presence made things even more complicated. Exhaustion, fear, and humiliation crashed over Lila in waves. She gripped her wheels, fighting not to cry again. For so long she had been the strong one, the silent one. She had endured therapies, surgeries, abandonment, polite smiles that never reached the heart. But in this moment, under humming lights and the gaze of a single night guard, Lila finally broke. "I don't want to be brave anymore," she whispered. "I just want to forget." The silence that followed was heavy, a crossroads for all three. Daniel watched her crumble, a mirror of nights spent holding Emma as she cried for the mother who had vanished. He realized that fixing things wasn't the answer. Being there, truly there, was. Emma, eyes wide with worry and love, put her hand over Lila's and whispered, "What if we just stay with you? We can pretend we're a real family just for tonight. No one disappears." Her voice, so simple and earnest, filled the emptiness with the faintest flicker of hope. Daniel knelt so his eyes met Lila's, rough palms open. "I'm not perfect, far from it, but I can stay. We can hold on to each other until the storm passes." And in that raw, unguarded moment, Lila nodded. Not because she believed things would be easy, but because, for a sliver in time, the ache of being seen outweighed the habit of hiding. They made a fortress of airport chairs and Emma's sunflower blanket. Daniel sat on one side, Lila on the other, Emma in the middle. Three souls stitched together by circumstance, but held by genuine, hard-won compassion. As fatigue pulled them toward uneasy sleep, Lila realized she'd found something more precious than escape. The courage to let people close, if only for a night. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, judgment, uncertainty, the light of day. But in the deepest hours of the night, with rain hammering outside and Emma's soft breathing beside her, a quiet miracle took root. Sometimes the only way out is through, and sometimes being carried by the kindness of strangers heals what loneliness never could. What began as a storm had become, at last, a lifeline. And by morning, none of them would be the same. The first fragile light of morning seeped through the panoramic airport windows, painting the empty terminal in ghostly gold. The storm had passed, leaving the tarmac slick with memory. Lila opened her eyes to find Emma snuggled under her arm, Daniel snoring softly on the other side of their makeshift fortress. For a moment there was only peace, the kind she hadn't felt in months, maybe years. No blaring alarms, no urgent meetings, just the heartbeat of three souls finding unexpected refuge together. But daylight brought hard realities, voices echoed. An arriving supervisor, a new security shift, the resumption of the airport's relentless choreography. Official eyes landed on Lila, Daniel, and the sleeping Emma, curiosity mixing with suspicion. The supervisor strode over, clipboard in hand. "Excuse me, this area is not for overnight stays. Miss, are you traveling unaccompanied?" Lila felt shame threaten to drown her newfound peace, but this time she did not shrink. With Daniel's steady presence behind her and Emma's fearless grip on her sleeve, she looked the supervisor in the eye. "My ride was delayed. These two—" Her voice wavered, then steadied. "They stayed to help, because I am not as alone as you think." Daniel stepped forward, rough-voiced but unwavering. "No one should ever be left behind, not in a storm, not in an airport, not anywhere." Emma, emboldened by her makeshift family, piped up, "We're her friends, and friends don't leave friends alone." The supervisor, confronted by this small army, hesitated. Then something in Lila's gaze, clear, unyielding, softened the official's stance. She nodded, quietly calling off the guard and gesturing for breakfast vouchers instead. Not pity, but respect. Soon the terminal bustled with new passengers, the world picking up its rhythm. Lila wheeled herself to the window, the last clouds fading above the city skyline. Daniel and Emma joined her, the three side by side, etched against the dawn. In those final moments before departure, a message buzzed on Lila's phone. Her father, all polite apology and missed emotion. She read it, shrugged, then turned her phone off. For the first time, she realized the future did not hinge on someone else fixing her life. It blossomed instead in the courage to claim connection, to let others in. Emma handed Lila her sunflower-patterned backpack, a temporary gift, a bridge between worlds. Daniel wrapped a protective hand around his daughter's shoulder and, before leaving, looked Lila in the eyes. "You ever need a family again, you know where to find us, storm or no storm." Tears threatened, but this time, Lila smiled through them. She was not broken, not invisible. She was seen. As Daniel and Emma melted into the crowd, Lila waited for her car, heart pounding with the rush of possibility. She knew there would be other storms, inside and out. But now she faced them not as an exile, but as someone who had found, even for a night, the fierce light of human kindness. In a world obsessed with arrivals and departures, sometimes the greatest journey is simply letting yourself be found. And as sunlight poured over Gate 23, the story of a lonely girl, a gruff father, and a brave little girl became a hidden legend, one that every traveler might pass by, never knowing that, on a rainy night, a miracle happened where two worlds collided and truly saw each other. Everything at last had changed. When Lila left the airport at sunrise, the city was stirring. 100 new journeys beginning, but hers felt singular, like a bird standing at the edge of flight. The previous night pressed gently against her skin. The thunder, the helplessness, the unexpected warmth, the friendships kindled beneath fluorescent lights. As the car took her away from Gate 23, Lila caught sight of her reflection in the window. She hardly recognized herself. Exhaustion painted beneath her eyes, but also a glow, a subtle strength. She realized the world still viewed her wheelchair first, her story second. But for several irreplaceable hours that long night, she'd simply been Lila, genuine, brave, deeply human. She'd been seen. Back home, her father swept in from meetings, business-like apologies delivered with flowers and frantic gestures. But Lila listened with new ears. She told him about Daniel and Emma, not as a plea for sympathy, but as a quiet declaration that she was capable of forming her own family, her own lifelines. As her father listened, a rare trace of humility softened his features, a recognition that all the wealth in the world could not substitute for presence and care. Somewhere across the city, Daniel packed Emma's sunflower bag with snacks for school. He lingered, watching his daughter tie her shoes. Their night at the airport had shifted something fundamental, an understanding that you didn't need to fix every problem, only to stand beside someone in their storm and refuse to leave. For Lila, the days that followed were different. She wrote to Emma, sending her origami cranes for her backpack. She joined an online group for young people with disabilities, sharing her story, her loneliness, her fears, and her hope. When the familiar ache of invisibility crept in, She remembered a little girl's fearless kindness, a grumpy dad's simple solidarity, and how, when it counted, she had let herself be found. The next time Lila returned to that airport, weeks later, wheels rolling on polished tile, she navigated with practiced grace. But now she made eye contact with staff, thanked them, cracked a joke at security. She noticed another shy traveler waiting by themselves and offered a smile, the kind that could, on the right night, become a bridge between worlds. The storm that changed her life had not vanished. It lived on, a memory of being broken and mended, of learning that courage is measured not in grand gestures, but in the willingness to be vulnerable, to ask for help, to reach out despite fear. And Gate 23 stood unchanged, a place of arrivals and departures, of people waiting for someone to see them. But long after the thunder faded, one story remained: how a forgotten girl, a determined father, and a fearless child turned a storm into the start of everything new. Sometimes the longest journeys begin with a single, simple moment of kindness. And as sunlight bathed the runway, Lila understood. She was no longer waiting for someone else to save her. She was moving ever forward with the unshakable belief that miracles begin when you let yourself be seen.